from the inclusive Bible, where even Jesus is able to learn new things about himself. Jesus left the Galilee and went to the territory of Tyre and Sidon. There he went into a certain house and wanted no one to recognize him, but he could not pass unrecognized. A woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him. She approached Jesus and fell at his feet. This woman, who was Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, begged Jesus to expel the demon from her daughter. He told her, "Let the children of the household satisfy themselves at table first. It is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." She replied, "Yes, Rabbi, but even the dogs under the table eat the family scraps." Then Jesus said to her, "For saying this, you may go home happy. The demon has left your daughter." When she got home, she found her daughter in bed and the demon gone.
Thank you, Sharon. We're going to get to that scripture, so hang on to that thought. But I want to talk a little bit, first of all, about our season of Lent in worship here. We will be exploring, engaging with racism. We will be spending the 6 weeks looking at what racism is and how that is a part of us and we are a part of it. We're using a series of words that were developed by the Reverend Dr. Davida McAllister in the Connecticut Conference of the United Church of Christ, which gives us kind of a process, a way to start looking at what racism is and develop as we go. So you can see there's a movement from tolerance all the way through solidarity and then critique, which is standing up and using our voices, going to action. So week by week we'll take one of these words and explore what that might mean for us and our own racism. Today the word is tolerance. And for many people that seems like a good thing. But this definition, putting up with someone or something that you find irritating or otherwise unpleasant, puts a different spin on the idea of tolerance. Well, I will tolerate you. I remember our old friend Nancy Zane always said, "I hate that word, I hate that word." I sent her a note this week saying I was thinking about her because we're addressing that issue, that tolerating something is a whole lot different than being in solidarity. So let's go back and look at this scripture passage. It's a famous passage, the Syrophoenician woman. Jesus encounters her, she encounters him. And on the surface, it took me a while to understand this. This is a case of Jesus getting it wrong and learning something from somebody he would least expect to learn something from. So she comes up to him and he's trying to find peace and quiet. He's gone way to the north. This is Palestine in Jesus' time. Jerusalem's down by the Dead Sea. Galilee up toward the 2/3 of the way up. And he's in the region of Tyre and Sidon. This is the top third of that map. So he's way out of his territory. And the people who live there are different folks. They're probably not Jews. And so he's made this foray into unusual country. So she comes to him and says, "Will you heal my daughter?" And he basically says to her, "Why should we give to the dogs, you, the dogs, when we have our own children to feed?" Now, there's lots of ways of interpreting this passage. This is one of them. And I think it's become the most common one because it shows us how real Jesus was. Jesus was a Jew, and he was out of his territory. He was reacting with a gut response saying, "Well, who are you? This is not the Jesus we know and love, so we don't like to hear this way of looking at this passage. We think he should be nice and take care of her." But she stands right up and says, "You may be right, Rabbi, but even the dogs get something to eat." And he What did he do? He said, okay. You got me. Really. This was a moment of turning, which we don't see very often with Jesus. And I love this passage because it helps me believe that even I, if Jesus could turn, even I can find a new way of looking at things. I think Jesus was acting from a position of privilege, except he was in a country where he didn't have that privilege. He was thinking, I'm Jewish, and this is what we do with our people. But he was totally out of his element. And the person whom he tolerated barely called the question on him, said to him, "You're wrong." Because even the dogs, even the least of these, and what do we hear from Jesus later on? Whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. So I think it's very important for us to see this as a way of talking about our own privilege. We've done this before here. We've talked a little bit about white privilege. What does it mean to have privilege? And I like this. Privilege is when you think something is not a problem because it's not a problem to you personally. Privilege is all those things that we aren't even aware of that give us a leg up. If you're a white male, you're kind of at the top of the pile. If you're a woman, you're not. If you're a person of color, you're definitely not. And these are just ways that our society has taught us to view each other. And as we engage with racism during Lent, I'm hoping that we can touch our own privilege. This is a very difficult thing to do. On Thursday night, we're going to see a video called Mirrors of Privilege that helps us look at ourselves and see how we play into racism, how racism is a part of us without us even knowing it. So I invite you, especially during this season of Lent, to think about how we are impacted and how we impact racism. And hopefully in the process of these 6 weeks, we can look in those mirrors a little more closely and get a better sense of how privilege affects who we are and how we treat others. And this story of Jesus' encounter with the Syrophoenician woman is one that will do us well to remember. Because we can learn, we probably learn even more from the people we least expect to learn from about us. So as we move forward in this process, remember that we're trying to confront racism, and we're going to look at both the problem and the response. I stole this from a book cover, by the way, so I haven't read the book, but I like what it said. Because it's not just about identifying the problem, it's about identifying our response to it. So I invite you during these next weeks to join with us in this exploration, in our sacred conversations on race during the week and on Sundays, engaging with racism through these various words and scripture passages. May God bless you with a new understanding and a cleaner